We are up to V'chama. V'cham Amma Benis, because we're talking about that the Amma that was used to measure anything in the base Hamikdash was an Amma Benis of 6 tvachim, which would indicate that there would be an Amma bigger and an Amma smaller. So the Amma that's smaller we've already identified is an Amma 5 tvachim. What is a larger Amma than the Amma Benis, the Amma of 6 tvachim? So we have over here as follows. We also learned a braysh like that. Rabbi Meir Omer Hashulchan Orchoi Shnei Masar V'Rachvai Shisha. That means that an amma is 6 tvachim. That's the baitiness, because we know that the shulchan was 1 amma wide and 2 ammas long. So if it's 6 tvachim by 12 tvachim, that would tell us that the amma was 6 tvachim. But there was an amma that was even bigger than the amma baininess. We're in I vatnan b'nichusa vatnan. We're going to now demonstrate for you where we have a larger amma than the amma baininess. Shtei amis hayu b'Shushan Habira. In Shushan Habira, which is referring to a storage area in the Beis Hamikdash. And on either side of the main door into the Azara, there were doors, smaller doors on the right and on the left. And there was a little storage area, little compartments there to store a measuring yardstick. And Achas al Keren Mizrachis Safinis. One was on the northeastern corner, which would be on the right side of the entrance into the Azara. The Achas al Keren Mizrachis Teremis, which should have been on the left side of the entrance to the Azara. Shal Keren Mizrachis Safinis, the one on the right side, was Yisera al Shal Moshe Chatzi Etzba, was a little bit longer than the Amma of Moshe, which was the 6 Tvachim. And Shal Keren Mizrachis Remes, on the left side, Hayasaya Allah was even larger than the larger Amma, was larger than the one on the right by another Chatzi Etzba. Nimtzas Yisera al Shal Moshe Etzba, meaning the one on the left was larger than the Amma of Moshe, which was 6 Tvachim, by the full Etzba, because it's a half Etzba bigger than the other one, and the other one was a half Etzba bigger. Frag the Gemara, why did you need 2 bigger Ammas? Below Ma'amru Achas Gedola v'Achas Ketana. Zok the Gemara, let's say a Newman accepted upon himself to build a wall that's an amma long, right? He would put an amma, $100 per amma. When they would measure the wall that's $100 per amma, they would give a little bit extra. You know why? Because they wanted to make sure that they're not short-changing. It's like a baker's dozen. They wanted to make sure they're not short-changing the Beis Hamikdash, so they would add a little bit. So why do you need one that's a finger bigger, one that's a half a finger bigger, one that's a finger bigger? Why do you need to go with 2 shiurim? Have 1 shiur. Give a little more. If they're giving a linear foot of gold, to give an extra whole finger is too expensive. So therefore, they only gave a little bit extra. But if they're building a stone wall, there they can add a full etzba, and that's why they give a lot more extra, just to make sure that they're not short-changing hektish. Now this lashon meila kadei shalo yavayu de meila. Rashi learned this meila, but Taisva says there wouldn't be meila, because when you're redeeming money of hektish, even 1 pruta could be mechalal a lot of hektish. But it just means not a short change hektish. It's not else we learned over there. Shar HaMizrach, the Shar HaMizrach, which was the central entrance into the Azara, Olav Shushan Habira Tzoira. There was a picture of Shushan Habira on top of the entrance. That's why that entrance area was referred to as Shushan Habira. To the right and to the left is where they kept these measuring sticks. But why was there an image of Shushan Abira, the capital city of Persia, at the entrance to the Beis Hamikdash? My time, Rav Chisda Rav Yitzchak Bar Avdimai Chadamar Kadesh Yedu Mehechenbo. They should realize that who allowed them to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash? It was the Persian Empire, Koresh, and they need to respect. They need to have a Koresh Atoiv to know who let them rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. The Chadamar, but one of these Manda Amrim Rav Chisda or Rav Yitzchak Bar Avdimai said it's Kadesh Shetehei Amos Malchus Alayim. To remember they're the boss. Paris are the boss now. We have to fear them. As Rashi says, don't rebel against the Persian Empire because we have to fear them because it's only under their authority that we're able to have the Beit HaMikdash. There's halachic reason to always have a fear of the current Malchus. Shenemar, it says Moshe warned Parai because when Moshe born Parba Makas B'chayris, it was like a little bit earlier than Makas B'chayris, because he was thrown out by Choshech. And he told Parai, I'm going to give you all you need to know now, but trust me, I'm not going to come back to you. You guys are going to come running after me to beg me to leave Mitzrayim. And Moshe told Parai, V'yordu kol avadecha Elah, Eli, all your servants are going to come to me, Vishtachavuli, and they're going to bow down to me, begging, Lamar, please leave our land, you're causing havoc. How come he didn't say, you yourself, Parai, are going to come to beg me to leave? Because V'ilu Malchus, Alecha, V'ilu Lidei, Loi Kamilei. He didn't tell Parai, you're going to come begging me. You know why? Because of Kavod HaMalchus. Even though Moshe Rabbeinu had the cards, as Trump would say, even though Moshe had the cards, but he still didn't be Mavaza Parai, and he said, your servants are going to come begging me, not you yourself. Even though that's what happened, right? It says the pasuk at the end, Vayakam Parai Laila. It was Parai who came himself to beg Moshe Rabbeinu to take Klal Yisrael and get out. We have another makor where you're supposed to respect the Malchus. Shenamar v'yat Hashem haisa el Eliyo v'yishanes mosnov v'yoras lefnei Achav ad boyach haYisraela. Achav was a bad king. He didn't deserve respect. Yet Eliyo Anovi ran in front of the king to show respect. Shein derech melachim laleches yechidi. A melech doesn't go by himself. So you see, even though he was a bad melech, but Eliyo ran in front of him because you're supposed to show respect and fear of the Malchus. V'alo l'srufa. It's talking, the Nova here is talking about the Mayim Chaim, the spring that's going to come from the Beis Kodesh HaKodesh and from the Evans Yosy, and it's going to form into a river, and on the banks of the river are the most beautiful trees going to grow, and the leaves of these trees will be a serufa, will be a healing. Why are we quoting this? It has nothing to do with our sugya, because once again, we're talking about a discussion between Rav Chisda and Rav Yitzchak Bar Avdimi. Rav Chisda and Rav Yitzchak Bar Avdimi, Chadam lahatir peh shalamayla. L'srufa is a nutrikoin of the word lahatir peh, to heal the mouth. Which mouth? Your upper lips. The Chadam are referring to a female, lahatir peh shalamata, to open up the lower lips. What does that mean? Itmar Chizki Amar lahatir peh ilemim. People who couldn't speak, if they ate pears from these trees or leaves from these trees, it would allow them to speak again. It healed the Elam. Bakapara Amar Lahatir Pe Ikros. If a woman couldn't give birth, it healed her. These leaves would heal her, will heal her. Tanu Rabbanan. Il Namar Velakachta Soilas. Vafisa Oisa Shtermes Rechalos. And this is, of course, referring to the Lechem Apanim. Take soilas and bake it into 12 chalos, v'samta oisam shtayim arochos, and set it up on 2 separate piles. But v'loy nemar sheish, but it didn't say that each of these piles have to have 6 breads. Hayisi oimer, I might have said, achas shal arba v'achas shal shmoina. Yes, I need 12 chalos, a total. Yes, I need 2 marochos, but it could be one marocha could be 8 and one could be 4, and the sum total will still be 12. That's why it's 6, because the 12 chalas have to be split into 2 marochas of 6 each. And if the Torah omitted to tell us the total was 12, just all the six breads, 6 per marachos, and two marachos with 6 each, then a Yosy Omer shalois shall sheish. Then I might have thought that there would be 3 marachos. Why would you think there would be 3 marachos if it says shtayim, but sometimes it's shtayim marachos? So Rashi tells us because we would have been marbezak Rashi the shtayim marachos hare train, and then when the pasuk gets sheisha marachas, we could have understood it as referring to a third mareches, hare mareches shlishis. The kach nemer, that's why the pasuk says shteim esrei, to tell us that there was a total of 12. Vidul nemar shteim esrei chalois umarachos. If it told us 12 chalois and 2 marachos, well, it never shteim and didn't say that there are 2 marachos v'sheish and each one had 6. Ha Yosy Omer shloisha shall arba arba. I might have thought that there were 3 marachos, each of 4, and 4 times 3 would be 12. Lakach nemer shtayim, there are 2 marachos, the sheish, and there were 6 chalas per maracha, and there was a total of 12. At shelo yomer gimel makrois halalu, until we didn't have these 3 details of information, that there was 12 in total, there was 2 marachos, and each marach had 6, loy lamadnu, we wouldn't have known with clarity exactly how the lechem aponim is set up. Haketzat, noisin shtayim marachos shall sheish. You have 2 piles of lechem aponim, and each pile had 6 in it. But if you split up the 12 into 8 and 4, lo yotza, you weren't yotza. What about shtayim shall sheva sheva? So you had 7 plus 7 is 14. What's the big deal? Ignore the top one, and you still have your 6 and 6. Rabbi Omer roines al yoyne kilo eina. And in fact, it would be kosher because you ignore the last one, the top one. Fragt the Gemara about inin v'nasata. Oh, doesn't it say you have to put the bezicha levayna on top of the lechem aponim? If you put it on top of the 7th, it's not on top of the 6th where it's supposed to be, part of the lechem aponim. So why wouldn't you say that the top one would be a chatzitza? Amalei Rab Chisda Rab Amnuna, Varmalei Rab Amnuna Rab Chisda. Rabbi L'Tamei Damar Al B'Samuch. We just learned 2 days ago that Al doesn't necessarily mean on mamish; it can mean beside. Where did we know it from? Remember, the Gemara said that the Machana Menachos was alav. The Gemara says was the Machana Menachos sitting on top of the other Machana? No, it means it was beside. So Al means beside. So therefore, Al doesn't mean that the Levine is on top of the Lechem upon him. It was beside. Problem is the Gemara here brings a different Makar. The Tanya Rebbe Aimer when the thought the Al Marachas Levine Zaka. Al means v'samach. Atoimer al b'samach al mamish. Kishoimer v'sakois al aron. The pasuk says v'sakois al aron is a paroiches. The aron covered the paroiches. It didn't cover the paroiches. It was standing independently. It shielded between the public and the paroiches. But you see from there, avoimer al means b'samach. So I don't know why here the Gemara uses that svara to tell us that al is b'samach. While a couple of days ago we learned the Gemara that says the raya was from the mamodos, the way they were set up in the midbar. Zog the Gemara weiter. Kol hakelim tanu rabbanim. Sorry, kol hakelim shebe mikdash. All of the kelim of mikdash were parallel to the dimensions of the Beis Hamikdash. So the length of the keli was parallel to the length of the Beis Hamikdash, and the width of the keli was parallel to the width of the Beis Hamikdash, and we mentioned that the Aron was the exception. Tanu Rabbanan kol hakelim shebemikdash arkan la'archai shel bayis chutz me'aron she'archai la'rachbai shel bayis. It was an arm and a half wide, and that width was connected the length of the Beis Hamikdash, and it was 2.5 amas long, and that was across the width of the Beis Hamikdash. That's how the Aron was placed. The kach hoya badav munach. Now this is a misleading statement because it sounds like the Aron's length was connected the width of the Beis Hamikdash, and the bottom's length were connected the width to the Beis Hamikdash. But we know that's not true. We know the length of the bottom were connected the length of the Beis Hamikdash. The bottom were parallel to the long walls, not the short walls. So the Gemara is going to clarify that. The Beis Hamikdash. What was Amawad?
You're saying it's connected
The shulchan was an amma wide, and the Aron was an amma and a half wide. That's the way it was in the base of Mikdash, as well as in the Mishkan. Practically, the only difference is the Mizbech had a different size. No. With my Omar, what do you mean that the bottom were on the same side as the long side of the urn? That's not what it was. The bottom were on the short side of the urn. So Dr. Marhachi Kamer, Kacha Yamunach midabadav Kacha Yamunachin. The urn had to be its long side was connected the short side of the Beis Hamikdash because of the fact that the bottom were on the short side, and we know that the bottom were parallel to the long side of the Beis Hamikdash. How do you know that the bottom were parallel to the long side of the Beis Hamikdash? So that we know the Tanya. It says Vayarichu Abadim. They set up the bottom. You would thought they didn't touch the paroiches. Now there was 10 amas between the Aron and the paroiches. So you would have thought that the bottom were not that long, that they actually touched the paroiches. Talmud Loimer Vayiru, they were seen. If they were seen from the Heichel, that means they must have punctured through the paroiches. Otherwise, how would you see them from the Heichel? You would have thought that they actually punctured the paroiches, so you can see the edges, the tips of the bottom from standing in the Heichel. You didn't see them. So they were seen, but they weren't seen. Let's look at the pasuk. Vayarichu habadim vayiro. This is in the Beis Hamikdash Harishon in Shlomo's Beis Hamikdash. Vayiro Rashi habadim and Hakadosh al pnei advir v'lo yiro achuta. They were seen in the Heichel, but they weren't seen. What does that mean? Zaktumar haketza. If you were standing in the Heichel, you would see the two bottom poking into the paroiches, but they wouldn't poke through. Doichkin uboiltin beparoiches. You saw the two bottom pushing on the paroiches, protruding out. If you're standing on the side of the Heichel, the diamond kamin shnei dadei isha. They look like the two breasts of a woman that stick out. That's what the two bottom look like standing on the outside. So you wonder, why are we using these types of comparison? Because it shows the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had for Klal Yisrael, like a mother to a child. Because the pasuk says in Shir Hashirim, Sarar Hamor, the bundle of perfume that a woman wears around her neck, that rests in between her breasts, Doidi Li is the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us. Bein Shada Yolin, we rest in between the Kavayachal, the breast of Hashem, were the most dear thing to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So that's what it looked like. Standing in the Heichal, looking towards the Paroiches, you saw that reference to the Kadosh Baruch Hu loves his child like a mother, or like a woman keeps the perfume in between her breasts. Uminalon the Badov Lefusya the Aron Havu. How do you know that the Badim were on the short side of the Aron? Maybe they were on the long side of the Aron. Uminalon the Badov Lefusya the Aron Haviyasvi. Maybe they were on the long side of the Aron, and maybe the long side of the Aron was parallel to the long wall of the Mishkan, of the Beis Hamikdash. Right? We wanted to say that's the short side of the Aron that's parallel to the long wall of the Beis Hamikdash, and on that short side is where the bottom were. How do we know that was the case? Rav Yehuda, it's very, very simple. Because when they carried the Aron, there were two people, one carrying each one carrying each one of the bottom. That means there had to be two people that would fit in between the bottom, which means that there had to be 2.5 amas in between the two bottom. Because if there's only 1.5 amma in between the bottom, meaning if the bottom were on the long side, two people couldn't fit in there to hold it. So Zok Gemor Amavu the Trey Gavri Ba'amso Pal Goloi Mistagalu. It wouldn't be possible for the two kaihanim to fit. It's actually two members of the Shevet of Kahos in Levi wouldn't be able to fit side by side to hold the bottom of the Aron when they were transporting the Aron. Therefore, it's only logical to say that the bottom were 2.5 amas apart, which by definition means they were on the short side, and the long side was in between them. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Let's see if we have a picture of that. I think we have a little bit of a picture of the Aron. I'll see if I can find it. What we're talking about over here. I do not have. But let me see if I can draw it. If I have a pen over here, I have paper.
Five. Part,
Yes, that makes sense.
yeah.
Okay. Zog to Gemara. Zog to Gemara. Trey Gabri ba'amshel pagaloi mistagalu. They wouldn't fit, so it has to be that the bottom were on the short side, and therefore the long side was in between the two sets of bottom. The barba hava dori lahu. How do you know it took 4 people to carry the aron? You're assuming there are 4 people, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. That's why you needed 2 people to stand side by side. How do we know that from a pasuk? Which is tray, that's 2 people, and noisei amikdash referring to the carriers of the aron, again 2 tray. Noisei amikdash nami tray, so that's a total of 4 Leviim carried the aron. Tanu Rabbanan. Asara shulchanois also Shloim HaMelech. Shloim HaMelech added 10 shulchanois to the 1 shulchan that Moshe Rabbeinu made. Shenemar, Bayas shulchanois Asara, V'yanach behechel. How were they laid out? How did they lay out all the shulchanois in the hechel? Chamish yamin, 5 to the right of the shulchan of Moshe, v'chamish mismoil. So we're going to have to figure out the layout, and that's what we're going to be working out today. Vim Taimar.
Can I interrupt for a second? I'm sorry. So we established that there's 4 Levium carrying the Aron. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
But you're assuming that 2 of them had to be on the inside of the 2 bottom. Is that correct?
They weren't right. They didn't hold the bottom from the outside. They held them from the inside.
How do we know that?
I'm not sure. That's a very good point.
Because we're using that as a
together,
proof.
and they could have held it on the outside.
You're using it as a proof to show that there are 4 Levium carrying it, right?
Correct.
Because
so how
you
do you
need
know that
this,
they're on the inside
you
or the
need
outside?
the space, but you don't really if they're carrying it on the outside. You don't need the space.
That's right. That's a good point. I hear that. You hear the David
Yeah,
Tyson. Who said they were in between the 2 bottom? Maybe they're on the outside. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the answer. That's a good horror. I do not know. Zogt Gemara v'im Taimar chamisha miyamin Pesach v'chamisha mismoila Pesach. Now we know the entrance to the Heichal was in the center. If 5 of these tables were on the right side of the entrance, which would be on the north side of the Heichal, and 5 were on the left side of the entrance, which would mean on the south side of the Heichal, then imkein matinu sheshulchan bedarim. That means 5 of the shulchanos on the left side would be on the south side of the Heichal. V'atayu amra v'shulchan titan al tzelat sofay. The shulchan only supposed to be on the north side, so it can't be that that's how the shulchanos of Shlomo were distributed, 5 to the north and 5 to the south, because they weren't supposed to be any shulchanos on the south. V'atayu amra v'shulchan titan al tzelat sofay. Elo shal Moshe be'emtza. Moshe's shulchan was in the center of the north side, and chamisha miminai v'chamisha mismoilai, but they were all on the north side of the Heichal, on either side of the shulchan of Moshe that was centered in the north side of the Heichal. Tanu Rabbanan, the same way we had 10 shulchanos, eser menoras asher shleima. Shlomo made 10 menorahs. Shenemar v'yas es ha-menoros hazav eser kemishpat v'yitan b'heichal. Again, they were in the Heichal. So there were 11 menorahs in the Heichal, and there were 11 shulchanos in the Heichal. Chamisha mimin v'chamisha mismail. V'imtoimer chamisha mimin ha-pesach v'chamisha mismail ha-pesach. That means 5 menorahs are going to be on the north side. Meaning on the south side only. Ella shal Moshe was be'emtza chamisha mimina v'chamisha mismoila, but everything was on the south side. All the menorahs were on the south side. It was just distributed to the right and to the left of the menorah of Moshe Rabbeinu.
Are these shulchanos? You put lechem upon them on all of those shulchanos, or they
The
had
Gemara is
another
going to discuss
function?
that tomorrow. The Gemara is going to say the lechem aponim was only set up on the shulchan that Moshe Rabbeinu had. The other ones were not put up; they did not get filled with lech. I'm not sure what their purpose was.
And,
Maybe the Gemara will explain tomorrow.
and I have the same question for the Menoras. Were they just for?
So that's the subject of tomorrow's Gemara. I just saw it briefly, but I didn't have a chance to look at it closely.
You know, when just as a point, when Josephus, the historian, describes that the Romans taking the Kalim of the Beis Hamikdash out, he talks about hundreds of menorahs. Now, I don't know what that is. Maybe it was for lighting purposes. I don't
Lamps.
know.
They could be lamps. It may not be that. I mean, maybe he's not referring to the menorah. He's just referring to lamps in general.
Yeah, maybe.
I hear. Okay. I mean, Josephus is accepted as an authority, as a trustworthy authority on what went on.
Yeah.
Often, the people who like, if you read the Mishkan Mikhailov book, the big fancy one, they actually try to correspond Josephus's account with what we know from the Mishnayos, and that helps them get clarity using both pieces of information in what actually was. It's very nice if you read a book. It's a coffee table book. There's a beautiful book, like almost like a coffee table book on the Mishkan Mikhailov, with pictures and everything. On the Mishkan, I'm sorry, on the Beis Hamikdash, and they use satellite maps. It's very fascinating how they place the exact location of everything. So they actually refer to what Josephus says a lot, and they try to correspond it to what we learned in the Mishnayos.
It's a great read. It's a great read, Josephus.
Correct. I'm sorry?
It's a great read, especially his description of the Churban and the aftermath and where they were taken and how they arrived at Rome and where it was kept. He was
very detailed. Like,
yeah,
there was one specific discrepancy that I read about is how many steps they had to walk up from the city to get up to the entrances to the Azara. And there was a discrepancy between there and the Mishnayos, and the author explains it all depends on which direction you were coming from. It was not perfectly even terrain. So in some places there were more steps than others. So Josephus was explaining how you got up from this side. And the Mishnah talking about how you get up from a different side. So it's very interesting how everything fits perfectly.
Modern archaeology and findings, how that
well, actually, this book actually relies on a lot of the modern discoveries of archaeology and show how everything fits into place. It's very fascinating. B'tani chada mishlish habayis. B'tani chada, we learned mechatzi habayis lefnim hayumenachim. They were on the inner half of the Beis Hamikdash. B'tani chada mishlish habayis lefnim hayumenachim. They're on the inner third. But v'loy kasha, it's not a steer. They both mean exactly the same thing. Marka choshev beis kacha kachim b'hadehechal. Now, how long was the full Beis Hamikdash? It was a total of 60 amas. The width was 20 amas, and the length was 60 amas. 20 by 20 was the Kodesh HaKodeshim, which was referred to as the Devir, and the Kodesh Hechal was 20 by 40. So if you're only talking about the Heichal itself, then it was on the inner half, the 20 amas closest to the Kodesh HaKodeshim. But if you're looking at the full 60, then it was past the first third, because it was in the 20 amas closest to the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So v'lo kasha marka choshev beis kacha HaKodeshim b'hadei Heichal, mar loika choshev beis kacha HaKodeshim. And that's why he said it was the inner half of the Heichal, or past the first third, if you're referring to the full 60 am length. Tana Rabbanan, Mizrach u'Ma'ariv hayu menachim. The direction of the menorah and the shulchan was from east to west. So when you walked in to the Beis Hamikdash, you only saw the side profile of the shulchan and the side profile of the menorah, because they were lined up from east to west. They're very Rabbi, but Rabbi Elazar, it was tzafim v'darim. It was set up north to south. So when you walked in, you saw the whole layout of the shulchan, and you saw all 7 arms of the menorah. My time with the Rebbe. What's as far of Rebbe who says it was Mizrach Umayriv? Gomar mi Menora. We learned the Shulchan from the Menora. Ma Menora Mizrach Umayriv. Just like the Menora was set up for Mizrach Umayriv, so when you walked in, you just saw one stick. You didn't see all seven because you were looking at it from the side. Avhani Nami, so to the Shulchan was Mizrach Umayriv. Fragt the Gemara, Umenora Gufa Minala. You're telling me Vibal the Menora was set up Mizrach Umayriv, so from there we know that the Shulchan was set up a Mizrach Umayriv. But how do you know that the Menora was set up Mizrach Umayriv? How could you have a Ner Maravi compared to the other Neros? It had to be that only one Ner was closest to the Ma'ariv and all the other Ners were further away. That would only make sense if the Menorah was set up from east to west, then you have a western Ner. If it's set up from north to south, then all of the Ners are equally distant from the Ma'ariv as they are from the Mizrach. So it must be that the Menorah was set up from east to west. If you set up the Menorah that it was parallel to the north and south, was parallel to that wall, it was perpendicular to the north and south wall, it ran from north to south, then Kulu Nami Lefnei Hashem Ninu. All of the Neros were in exactly the same position as far as their distance from the western wall. Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon, my time, so Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon who learns that in fact it was set up from north to south. Where did he get it from? Also Gomer Ma'arin. He doesn't learn it from the Menorah, he learns it from the Aron. Ma'arin Tafan V'Darim. We know the Aron was set up from north to south, right? Its long end was parallel, its long side was parallel to the short side of the base of Mikdash, as we just illustrated. Afhaninami, Safain V'Darim. So too the Shulchan and the Menorah was Safin V'Darim. Fragt Gemara of a Rabbi Nami Ligmar Me'arin. Why does Rabbi learn it from the Menorah? And he says the Menorah is from east to west, so therefore the Shulchan must be from east to west. Why not learn it from the Aron where it was from north to south? Because he held on in Chutz Michutz. We learned Kalim in the Heichal, from Kalim of the Heichal, Vein done in Chutz Mipnim, and we don't learn Kalim in the Heichal from the Kalim that are in the Kodesh HaKodeshim from the Mizbech, from the Aron. Fact the Rabbi Elazar by Shimon Ligmar Mi Menorah. Why doesn't he learn from Menorah and learn that it's also from east to west? Amar Loch, because I hold the Menorah was also Menorah Gufa Tzafim B'Darav Havamancha. So now we have a problem. What's the Ner Maravi? If they're all equal as far as their location towards the west. The way he learns, the way Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon learns is, yes, the Menorah was lined up in a straight row and they were all equally distant from the west. But he learned that the central Ner, the wick pointed towards the west, and the Ners on either side, on either of the branches, pointed towards the center. So the Ner Maravi was referring to the center Ner, which the wick pointed towards the west, towards the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Oh yeah, we do have pictures now. So this is if it's in the center, this goes towards the Maravi, and all the ones on the side point towards it. And that's the same thing as well here. He doesn't show the other layout. Okay, Zok Tamar Viter. This picture is the old Rashi picture. It's not the ArtScroll picture. Okay, Zok Tamar Viter.
Honestly, you do see it though.
Yeah.
You see the thing pointing.
You do see it. That's correct. Zok Tamar Viter. The Tanya we learned, Al Mulpade Menorah, Irishivas Haneris, Malamid Shayu Mitzadid in Paneim Klapi Nerem Tzai. All of the Neris pointed towards the center there. And Zok Gemara, Amar Rav Nosan, Mikan She'emtzoi Mishubach. The fact that the Menorah was set up that everything should point towards the center, it proves that the center of everything is the most important. And he applies it lahalacha to a laning on Monday and Thursday. By a laning on Monday and Thursday, the minimum amount of psukim that you're supposed to lane is 10. So how do you split up the aliyahs? You have to have 2 aliyahs of 3 and 1 aliyah for a total of 10 psukim. The Levi should always have the aliyah that's 4 psukim, because that's the center aliyah. It should be mishubach. If you learn that the orientation was from east to west, you have a long 40 amis of heichal. Hanud aviyasvi asara be'esrim. How long was each shulchan? 2 amas. So if you line them up end to end, starting from the western wall of the Heichal, so if you start from the wall that's separated between the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKodeshim, and you lined up 10 shulchanos that all were 2 amas long, 2 times 10 is 20, right? It'll fit within that space. So Bishlam Amar Mizrach Amariv Hainu they have a Yosivi Asara Be'esrim. The 10 shulchanos lined up end to end would fit within those 20 amas. So remember, we learned that it's supposed to be on that half of the heichel. The problem is, if the tables were laid out from Safin to Durham, the whole heichel was only 20 amas wide. How are you going to fit 10 tables that are each 2 amas in 20 amas? It's going to be too tight. You can't put them in so tight together. So Frank the Gemara, Yud Bechaf Heicha v'Yasi. How could they possibly line those tables up across the whole Heichel? It's going to bang into the 2 side walls. Visu, another problem. How do you get into the Kodesh HaKodeshim? How do you get around to the other side of the Shulchan? If the Shulchanos form a wall from side to side, they block the whole way. Visu Kohanim Heicha v'Aidli. Visu, there's a bigger problem. Matzinu Hei Shulchanos B'Daraim. We said that they all have to be on the north side. If you line them across the whole Eichel, then 5 of them are going to be on the left side, on the south side. Visu, that only takes care of 10 shulchanos, but there was 11. Shulchan the Moshe Hechamanachle. Where would you put the shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu? Zog to Gemara Ulatamech. You think that if you hold it set up from east to west, it would be any better? It's 22 amas. It's going to stick in past into the other side. It's only supposed to be within 20 amas of the inner wall of the Heichal. Ella mi sarvis chadar hava. You're assuming that all the 10 tables were lined up in one row, and now you have a problem how it's going to fit. But that's not what it was. It's trey darininu. There are 2 rows, each one with 5 shulchanos. So it was 2 rows of 10 amas. 2 rows of 10 amas will fit within 20 amas, no problem. Zog to Gemara, but we have to drill down a little further, because if you look into it closely, it's still not going to fit. Zog to Gemara. So these are the other pictures that the Gemara is going to discuss now shortly. Because even if you have 2 rows of 5, right? If you have 2 rows of 5, the Gemara is about to tell us that from the back wall, this is from the north wall, you had to have 2.5 amas. The reason why you need 2.5 amas is because it takes 2.5 amas for 2 people to walk. If you remember earlier, we said by the Orid, in order for 2 kohanim to stand side by side in between the bottom, it had to be 2.5 amas. So a pathway that 2 people can walk side by side in is 2.5 amas. So you needed to have 2.5 amas between the north wall of the Heichal and the tables. That's 2.5 amas. The table is an amma, that's 3.5. Another 2.5 amas, which brings it to 6. Then you have the table of Moshe Rabbeinu that was in the center, which brings it to 7. Then you have 2.5 amas, which brings it to 9.5. And then the last one is 10.5. It leans over onto the other side. Again, you have a problem because these tables are going to be encroaching on the south side of the Heichal. If you set it the other way, it would be perfect because you have 2.5 amas from the wall of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Then you have your 5. Then you have the second set of 2.5 amas. Then you have Moshe. Then you have 2.5 amas. And so you fit well within 10 amas. And this is also about 10.5 amas, so it sticks over a little bit, but that's not such a problem. So Zog to Gemara, Bishlama, Laman Damar Tavim V'Dorim, Shapir, we showed in the picture how it fits in. Laman Damar Mizrach L'Mariv, Michti. Let's lay it out as we saw in the picture. Shulchan Kama Mashach Menachos, Shtei Amas V'Mechza. Counting from the north wall, there's 2.5 amas of space for the Kohanim to stand. V'Amodidei. Then you have an amma of the width of the Shulchan. Then Shtei Amas V'Mechza, to be a hashik between those shulchanos and Moshe Rabbeinu shulchanos. And then you have the Moshe Rabbeinu shulchan, and then you have another 2.5 amas, so shtei amas u'mechzah de beni v'amadidei. Ishtagach de ka'achal shulchan palga de amas b'darim. if you line up the shulchanos from east to west, the lower row, as we showed in the picture, is going to encroach on the south side of the heichal. Zok the Gemara, mi sarver shulchan the Moshe ba'adayu hava Yosef. Who said Moshe Rabbeinu shulchan had its own row in between the two rows of five? Loi, the midlele umanachle umitzilu lididu porta ketalmud Yosef l'fnei Rabbi. What they did is they didn't put the shulchan as a separate row in between. They had it removed from in between, a little off to the side, like a Rebbe's desk, sitting before his Talmidim. Now, it's interesting to note that the Gemara also says that the whole floor of the Beis HaMikdash was on the slope. It was higher on the west. The elevation was higher on the west than it was on the east. So this here would be a little bit higher than these tables here. So this is like the Rebbe who sits a little higher, and the
reverse theater style.
exactly, it's reverse theater style where the Rebbe's above and they're below. I told him to call me a tentate, but he doesn't call me a tentate. It's not tentate now. It's 7:51. I'll call him back. So doesn't want to. I'm trying to shut it down. Okay, so Zok to Gemara, that's what was set up, and therefore everything fit just fine. So therefore, the middle lay umanachlei umitzilu they do porta ketalmud Yosef Rabbi, and now everything fit in perfectly. Okay, we'll stop here, Be'ez Hashem, and we will continue.